This is the story of this building. It's called the SU+RE House, and it was intended as a sustainable and resilient prototype for coastal housing. I'm talking about it as an introduction to what I would call practical and sustainable resilient design. So it's a case study, and as such, I think we need to start at the beginning and talk about terms. So what is sustainable and what is resilient? I find sustainable to be a very simple concept. Let's look at the word. Able to be maintained at a certain rate or level. So what are we maintaining and what's the rate or level? We're maintaining this. It's a matrix of systems that have developed together very slowly over billions of years in such a way that the outputs of some systems are the inputs for others, creating a loop that sustains itself. The only exterior input is the sun, which is a constant. So the level is industrial human society. We humans have pretty recently evolved and developed a complex set of systems that are built on top of this, and we want or need to maintain industrial human society. So we want to have cities, we want to have lots of people that are supported by industrial agriculture, in other words, agriculture that's mechanistic. We want people's lifestyles to continue to improve. We want people happy. So that's the level that we want to maintain. Just to get into sustainability in a little more detail, in this actually literal example, the relationship between a squirrel and a tree. The squirrel is the rectangle and the tree is the circle. The squirrel will eat nuts that fell from the tree, but bury some of them, that then grow into more trees. Through that process, the squirrel is exhaling carbon dioxide, which the tree then inhales, and the tree is exhaling oxygen, which the squirrel inhales. The squirrel will excrete wastes and eventually die. Both of those materials will compost into soil, which the tree then takes up as nutrients, allowing more squirrels to grow because they procreated during the life of the squirrel. The sun drives this whole mechanism. Wind is driven by the sun. Heat, the temperatures of the planet are driven by the sun. The hydrologic cycle, and photosynthesis. Photosynthesis bears discussing a little bit because it's kind of the driver for everything. We forget maybe that it's just sunlight and chlorophyll, so plant tissue, turns carbon dioxide, water into sugar and oxygen. And so that mechanism allows or engendered basically the planet to be covered by plants. And then this cycle of insects and animals, insects pollinating plants, feeding animals, animals eating plants and insects, animals eating animals, animals dying, creating soil, growing more plants, and creating this system that's the basis for life on the Earth. Okay, so that's sustainability, pretty straightforward. The next point, though, is that climate change is not sustainable. So, and so much so, it's such an important baseline issue now that I think sustainability is simply equal to mitigating climate change. So in other words, stopping climate change. And once we get that under control, there's many other things we have to worry about, but this is a baseline activity or a baseline goal that we have to meet. So so what do we have to do? So conceptually we started with this, let's say 15,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago. This is what we had. Now we have this. So that's a pretty drastic change pretty quickly. It's maybe not surprising that major changes have occurred. We know what's happening. This is really the only chart you need if you have one that you can look at to understand climate change. This is a graph of a bunch of thermometers or outputs from thermometers. This is a U.S. government graph starting in 1880 up till this is 2020. So they just picked some random year, not random, but they picked a year to say, okay, we'll make that the mean And any year that has a temperature above that will be red. Any year that has a temperature below that will be blue. We can see that the temperature is rising. It's not a complicated thing to figure out, really, when it comes down to it. We know why. The content of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has gone up precipitously very recently. These are ice cores, so we can study the composition of the Earth's atmosphere over a long period of time. This is 800,000 years back. Incredible that we can do that. We can see that very recently carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has been increasing. We know why. The population of the planet, the human population of the planet, has grown very quickly, very recently. It was very stable for a long time. And you can see that this is basically the same graph, right? So we have a lot more people, and more of these people want to burn fossil fuels as part of their lifestyle. So we have a world that is frantically burning fossil fuels. And if that can be in transportation, it can be in electrifying buildings. This is a coal train. Some of these can be a mile long per day going to a coal-fired power plant, so it's a lot. And so the basic idea is that it's not that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is a bad thing. Of course not. We're carbon-based life forms. But all that's happened is we've taken carbon that was meant to be part of a cycle, a very short-term cycle where, like I said, a squirrel dies, the carbon in its body turns into humus, is pulled up by plants. They exhale some of that carbon dioxide. The squirrel breathes some of it back in, but some of it stays in the atmosphere. But what we've done then is we've started bringing up, over the last several hundred years, bringing up very ancient carbon and putting it into the atmosphere very quickly. So we're creating an imbalance. And we're seeing the effect of that and of course I could go into much more detail on that. I'm not trying to make this a talk about climate change, but I feel like some description is needed. And we can see the effects of this very clearly. This is ice melts, 1979, 2021. There's many other examples. And we've been talking about this for a long time as the human society. Since 1995, the UN has had a conference of the parties. It's called COP. This is a picture of Obama in 2015 at that event. Unfortunately, we're not really making much progress. Our carbon footprint continues to increase. And although here in North America we have reduced our percentage slightly over the last few years, we still have the largest cumulative carbon footprint, and we have by far the largest per capita footprint. So this is really a problem very central to us, or a situation. Well, it's a problem. And this is also not mysterious because we can see it happening every day. This is a NOAA U.S. government website that is attached to or is bringing data down from a weather station in Hawaii. Was chosen in Hawaii because it's very clear air there, or it's not as affected by cities. And we can see the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere rising. The first time I looked at this was before 2019, but here 2019 was 414, and in 2024 in January, so a little over a year ago, I looked there and it was 420. So it's going up. So that's, again, it's pretty simple. We see it happening. We know that that's causing the warming. There's a very simple mechanism for that. But what's complicated is predicting exactly what's going to happen. And it's not just warming, because once the warming starts, other things start changing also. And so there's complex computer modeling predicting what's going to happen, a lot of variables involved in it. And sometimes this is interpreted as unsurety or disagreement. And we just need to basically say that that's not true. Scientists are in agreement that climate change is happening. And it is a quantity. That quantity is an amount of carbon that we can allow in the atmosphere. So 350 parts per million is what climate science is telling us we need to get the level back to if we don't want to start a feedback loop. In other words, if we're keeping above that level, then we can't predict what the effect will be, and it takes a while for the carbon that we emit to have an effect. And so The concern is that we will quickly get to a point where we cannot control anymore by changing our actions what the effects of the carbon emissions that we're producing. So, I mean, we essentially become prisoners of our own stupidity at that point. Uh, so the number that we're trying to get to is 350. When I made this slide first, it was 415. Now it's 420 that we are at. And so the question being, if you're a designer, which we're all designers, you design your day, what should we shoot for? And it should be 0. That's just the simplest way of thinking about this. We should try to design the carbon out of our lives, the carbon emissions out of our lives. And if there's any so what frustrates me sometimes is that people like to talk about, well, it's not completely, there's no agreement about this, or there's a lot of different opinions. That's not really true. It's as well established as pretty much any scientific theory. And so, and it's the same scientific method as we use to develop all the things that all of us use in our daily lives, or most of us, like cell phones. So I kind of feel like if you don't want to accept this as part of the mandate for being alive right now, then you should just turn in your cell phone, because it's the same thing as far as I'm concerned. The other thing is it's kind of trivial. You think about humans. So Voyager 1 we sent into space in 1977. It's now 15 billion miles away. The Cassini space probe we sent in 1982, it took this picture of Earth from Saturn. The Webb Space Telescope was recently launched and it's now orbiting the Earth. No, I'm sorry, it's orbiting the Sun 1 million miles from Earth, and it's taking pictures like this. This is of something called the Phantom Galaxy. It's about 32 million light years from Earth. I mean, come on, we're pretty amazing at what we can accomplish. So this is not a difficult thing. And so the question is, how do we get to 0? And we're talking specifically about architecture at this point, or the built environment. Carbon neutrality is, so there's carbon in various aspects of a building's life. You have what's called embodied carbon in the construction process. That's all the carbon that's in the materials themselves, or in the extracting them, getting them to the job site. I guess the sandwiches that the truck drivers eat as they're driving there. You know, all of that is part of the embodied carbon of a project. The operational carbon is what it takes to heat, cool, and power a building. So it's the carbon that's associated with the operation of the building during its life. And then you also have to take responsibility for the decommissioning. So that's just one thing. It's how long the building's going to last, but also what you do with it when it's done. Can you reuse it, etc. And so it turns out that right now most of the carbon in buildings is on the operational side, because our buildings are pretty they use a lot of energy. As we get more energy efficient, then we'll have to think more about, and we already should be, but it'll become more important that we think about the embodied energy of projects. But right now, just the basic thing we have to do is get our operational energy under control. So how do we do that? It's actually, again, it's so trivial. All we need to do is save energy through load reduction. And that's pretty easy to do because we've never really done it before until very recently. So 1960, this is the Guggenheim. This is a cut through the Guggenheim Museum. Very famous building, a wonderful building. The black is concrete. So it's basically a solid concrete building. Concrete is not good insulation. It does not resist the flow of heat very well. On the right is just a house built to the state of the art, like a quality house right now. It's got a lot more layers. It's got a complex building envelope. So that's changed a lot recently, and we know how to build buildings that have very low requirements for heating and cooling. Insulation itself was really only invented as a product during World War II, and so many of the buildings that architects study are not insulated. And so this is just a list of these, and the house I'm in an apartment in Hoboken right now that's uninsulated. So this is just something that we know how to do it. We just haven't really kicked into it completely, and different parts of the world are doing more than others. The same thing with mechanical systems. If you had a mansion, if you had a castle in 1200 and you needed to heat it, you would have a fire on the floor without a chimney because we didn't have chimneys. Um, this is, you know, this is true until fairly recently. I mean, not exactly that, but so for example, in the 20th century, um, we had very basic or no mechanical systems. This is a building in Chicago built around 1900. Uh, this is called the Chicago window, where you have a central piece of fixed glass and then operable glass on both sides that you can open to get some cross ventilation and some summer cooling. So that was the mechanical system for this building to a large part. And then now we have our mechanical systems are so prevalent and so important that they basically look like a building. So the colors that you see in this the image on the right are the mechanical system of that project. So things have changed quite a bit, and all we have to do is just implement what we know how to do now everywhere. So it's really kind of boring. We have to lower heating, cooling, and plug loads, and we know how to do it. There's some very basic approaches to making that happen. So there's lots of very low-hanging fruit to lower our energy loads. The problem is simply that we have not, in the United States especially, we have not really integrated it completely as part of the way we look at architecture. This is a very famous building in Chicago, built I think around 2010. It's called the Aqua Tower. It was touted, I think it's still touted as a sustainable project. It's beautiful, a wonderful building. It's also a heat exchanger. It's a radiator. And the picture on the right is an infrared photograph taken on a cold Chicago night. You'll see that the purpler colors are colder than the purple is colder than the yellow, and the purple is on the windows, which would normally be hotter because there'd be more heat moving through it in the winter in Chicago. But it's actually the concrete itself, the wall itself, that's losing the most heat, and that's because it's a solid piece of concrete going from outside to inside with no insulation between. So it's just a boneheaded move. And it's so boneheaded that this is the Wikipedia page for thermal bridging. Thermal bridging basically means a hole in your insulation, and it's a mistake. So all that needed to be done to fix that would be to apply a already commercially available product. Like this is I won't go into the details of it, but basically it's a form of insulation that will allow you to have a balcony outside and have it insulated from the inside. So it's just a product of, and again, I mean, that's a great architect, way better than me, but just they made a mistake, right? And we need to get better at this, and we need to make this a very conscious part of everyone's thought process in architectural design. This is a building in Austria that has no heating or cooling system. Pretty cold in Austria, right? Not much of a cooling load, but so I'm saying that from here to here, they're both serious architectural buildings. This one needs no heating or cooling. It's completely passive because of the way it was designed. And it's also the law. So in New York City, a law was passed. It was written in 2019 and just went into effect in 2024, called Local Law 97. It mandates that any building, there's some exceptions, over 25,000 square feet existing or new, needs to meet stringent carbon emission standards, and every 5 years it's going to be more stringent. And the penalty is money. So this is a chart of buildings in New York City that exist right now. The orange is the 2024 fine, and the red would be the 2050 fine if nothing is done. There's no retrofits done. So the Guggenheim, I think that they probably fixed it because it was probably a mechanical system adjustment would have done it. But would have had I don't know. But in 2024, they would have had a $215,000 fine. In 2050, it would be $260,000 per year. The General Motors building, over $1 million, right? So this is serious in 2050, serious money. And then there's already buildings in New York City that are at the 2050 level. So the point being, we know how to do it. It's not technically difficult. It just takes the desire to do it and on everybody's part. Okay, so let's assume then that we have lowered our loads and made a building that has very low energy needs. the next step is that we have to make energy. And we do that with renewable energy in excess of the project's needs. Renewable because if we're making energy with the sun in some way, and pretty much all renewable energy is from the sun. Hydrologic. I said that the hydrologic cycle is powered by the sun, so hydropower is solar power. Wind is really a form of solar power. Photovoltaic energy is the most direct use of the sun. But so the idea is that once the system is installed, there's a carbon footprint there's an embodied carbon in the system for sure. Once it's installed, it's carbon neutral, and so it's making carbon neutral power. And so the advantage of these systems is, first of all, they're very well tested, especially the photovoltaics. They're powering things like in very harsh environments like space, powering the International Space Station. There's many products out now that are for various scales, from housing. This is like a turnkey system with integrated batteries, up to very large projects like this is the Cornell campus on Roosevelt Island in New York City, and you can see the solar panels on the two lower buildings. The building in the middle was the largest passive house built. I think it was 2018 when it was finished. Passive house is a German energy efficiency standard, basically, where it's passive because the idea is supposed to be that you can build buildings that don't require heating and cooling systems. And the building on the left is the Bloomberg Center by Morphosis, and it purports to be site net zero. So it's making all of its own energy on site. That's that building. And so the idea here for carbon neutrality from energy production, it goes as follows. First, we have to reduce our loads, like I said. And then there's a little bit of a trickery here, but it's not really, because it's very true until once everybody is producing renewable energy, we'll have to find other ways to reduce a project's carbon footprint all the way to carbon neutrality. But right now, this is how it works. If your first goal is to make 100% of the energy your project requires on site or through some kind of microgrid or cogeneration. Doesn't have to be photovoltaics, whatever. That's called site net zero energy. All systems have waste, and so you have to take that into consideration for source net zero. And that means what's the actual energy requirements, the embodied energy included for your energy, the energy that you're using in your project. And so, for example, if you are doing a grid-tied energy system, like all of the projects I just would have showed you would have, you have to produce a lot more energy because a grid-tied system has a lot of waste. First of all, you've got friction, like if there's turbines at the power plant, you have a lot of friction there, and so you lose a huge amount of energy from, let's say, you're burning coal. So if we're making photovoltaic energy and putting it on the grid, we're maybe sending it. We're part of a grid that has coal-fired plants or other carbon-based. Carbon combustion-based fuel systems. Anyway, the point is that you have inefficiencies and you have to make up for those at their carbon footprint as part of your project. So you have to make extra energy, put it on the grid. Somebody near you uses it and then therefore is not using carbon-intensive energy, and so then you can take credit for that. So that would be source net zero. If you're making enough power to take credit for all the energy and the source of your energy use. And then the final step for carbon neutrality would be making even more power to make up for the embodied carbon in your project. So those are the tiers, and that's the goal. So the point then, the summary there, is that sustainability, in my mind, right now, is simply mitigating climate change. Until we can do that everywhere, that's the definition. So then what's resilient, and why are we bringing that up as part of this whole concept? So if sustainability is mitigating climate change, we have to also realize, as we've said already, that climate change is already happening. And so we have to adapt to those changes while we're trying to mitigate it. So resilience is adapting to the climate change that's already happening. And there's tons of evidence of this. I'm going to go and just click on this. This is I'll have to say this is a NASA site, so I don't know how much longer it's going to be up right now based on our political situation. Um, but it's powerful. You go to a U.S. government site and you see all this evidence. Just scrolling down here on this, here's the chart that's very famous that I was showing about from the ice cores showing the carbon footprint. Global temperatures are rising, the ocean's getting warmer. This is summaries of things that are scientifically determined. Ice sheets are shrinking, glaciers are retreating, snow cover is decreasing, sea levels rising, Arctic sea ice is declining, and extreme events, weather events are increasing. There's tons of places that you can scroll through here, and look at different pieces of evidence about these. So there's lots of data here that you can download and look at. You'll see here, I'm not making this up, mitigation and adaptation is just the way we look at it in my profession. All right, so there's tons of evidence of this, and so it's happening now. We need to be thinking about how to adapt to it. And one of the effects is increased flooding. And high tide flooding. And so that's going to be the resiliency approach to the SURE house that we're going to talk about. So the summary is that sustainable and resilient design we need sustainable and resilient paired together because we're mitigating while adapting to climate change. And so now we're back at the SURE house, and we're going to talk about how this project conceived of this problem and tried to solve it in its own context. So the SURE house was a project done for the Solar Decathlon, which is I think now defunct U.S. government competition that ran every 2 years, and it's a student run or student involvement in the project, where you design from scratch, from a blank sheet of paper, design, build, ship, rebuild, and run as a house on a competition site, a completely solar-powered house that has to be narrative driven. It has to have a reason to exist other than just that. And there are 10 contests. That's why it's a solar decathlon. 5 of them are juried, like architecture, affordability, and then 5 of them are quantitative. The SURE house is you have to build a building that's 1,000 square feet or less. We designed a beach bungalow, 2-bedroom, 1 bathroom, open living room, kitchen area. The basic idea is that the north side, the top of this drawing is the entrance on the street. The bedrooms sort of protect the green area, which is the public space from the street. You have a large open public area, small bathroom, and then the bedrooms and the public area are surrounded by outdoor space that is 3-seasoned living space. So you get a much larger amount of square footage to use with a small interior space. And this is a very typical way, especially with high performance building. The square footage inside is very expensive, but the square footage outside is cheaper, but the most desirable. So if you maximize that and put those together, it's a very productive way of designing. It's a sort of 60s style, in my mind, beach bungalow, a lot of wood. So it's called the SURE house because it's sustainable and resilient. And its direct inspiration was Hurricane Sandy, which happened in 2012 and hit both New Jersey and New York very hard. A number of deaths, lots of property damage, lots of homes without power. And so the concept for this project was to be sustainable and resilient in the following way. First, sustainability, as we said, is just producing a very energy efficient building and then producing all the power plus more that the project needs. The resilient focus here was on durability, is basically what resilience is, but this is durability on the coast, so it needed to be flood proof. So let's talk about a little bit more specifically about the sustainability strategies. Um, these are well established. You you look at first at passive approaches. Passive means things that don't need to be have inputs. So or inputs that you pay for. So we had very conscious sun control of the building, cross ventilation, things of that nature, and then the way to make a very energy efficient envelope is to insulate well above code, focus on things like thermal bridging that the Aqua Tower didn't do, build airtight, and then use something called energy recovery ventilation, which allows you to exchange fresh air from outside with stale indoor air without losing much energy. So the point is, it's a pretty simple set of criteria that have been tried, well established to work, and we know how to do them. Um, we packaged it in a fairly complex but understandable to anybody building, any contractor building envelope. And very importantly, the mechanical system and the energy system and the photovoltaic energy system and the floodproofing were designed as part of the building from the beginning. Sustainable and resilient design, you have to be thinking about it from the beginning. It's part, so energy production is part of architecture now, in my opinion. We were able to understand the sizing, for example, of the PV system and how much insulation we needed in the walls, etc., by doing extensive modeling, which is very accessible now and pretty not easy to do. It's easy if you know how to do it. So we modeled this building from the beginning, both. So this is a heat and cooling energy model. This is a thermal bridging model of the building envelope. This is a passive house planning package. So this is an energy model to see if we're meeting the passive house standard. We also we used a variety of tools that were and compared them for different types of energy models, hourly, monthly, and the nature of this approach is that you can divide up different components or assemblies of the building and determine how much each of them is causing gains or losses, and you balance this out. So if you have a certain amount of gains and losses in a month, if you have more gains than you have losses, then you need cooling. If you have more losses than you have gains, you need heating. And so we designed a building that we estimated or that we simulated would use 90% less energy than an average New Jersey home in its in its market. Another interesting thing about this project alone is it was designed well. It was built in 3 different places. So you'll see in a minute that we built it on the site. We had to build it initially on the site in Hoboken. We then shipped it to California. And so we could build it and test it on the site in Hoboken. We had to ship it to California, and the competition is a week long, and you run it as a house. You have to wash dishes and do laundry, and you have to have dinners in there and movie nights, and the entire time you're monitoring the energy use and the comfort levels. And then the building came back to New Jersey, and so that's another site. So we not only were able to model the building, but we were able to test it in several different locations, which is pretty unique for a project and very interesting. And so what we found was that we, first of all, that our modeling was pretty accurate, and that we had designed a building that would have a significant energy surplus over its site needs. So it would be at least source net zero and heading toward carbon neutrality. So that's what this slide's saying, is that it's hard to say exactly what carbon neutral would be because that's a complex calculation. But the point is that we headed well in that direction with the project. Okay, so we established that we were sustainable at a very high level, both through design and simulation, but also through testing. So what about resilience? How did we approach that? Well, again, the impetus for the project, or the sort of the immediate, the thing that made us think about it, was Superstorm Sandy. This is a picture from Superstorm Sandy on the Jersey coast. Seaside Park, the amusement park there, underwater or in the waves. Uh, FEMA's response to this was to say, okay, well, great, you cannot now, you can't get insurance if you're going to be in the flood zone. So you have to then, if you're going to remodel your house, you have to or build a new house in certain parts of the country, which is basically all the coast. You have to lift your building out of the floodplain, which is a good engineering answer, right? Okay, that makes sense. You just lift it out of danger, but it's not really good for the social fabric of the neighborhood. Things that architects think about. Um, and this was really driven home to us because so this was the third time that Stevens had been in the solar decathlon, and as the house, so every 2 years when the project would start or was being built, it would be built on in a parking lot that Stevens owned in Hoboken that's on the Hudson River. And so in the 2013 competition, um, the that version of the solar decathlon from Stevens was being built on this parking lot. Superstorm Sandy had happened in 2012, so this is 2013, and people are getting nervous because it's getting to be hurricane season again. And so a storm was coming. The decision was made to, I think it was $10,000 to lift the building that was being built up off the ground, so that it would, so just like this, so that if it did flood, it wouldn't damage the building. And the team thought, if we do this again, this is ridiculous. We got to make it floodproof. So it was very personal. My office in Stevens was at the on the water, and it flooded. There's a like a flood flood line that you could see in my office. So the idea was, and this is a really good use of this kind of a competition. What we did was something illegal because it was against FEMA regulations. We said, okay, we get you FEMA. One way to solve this problem is just to build out of the flood zone. But what if we design something that can actually stay in the flood zone and be closed down? You can't stay inside of it. You have to lock it down from outside. You leave, you come back, and not only will it be protected, but then when you open it up, you'll be making power immediately because it can make its own power off of the grid, not connected to the power grid. And we'll make it to where the neighbors can use some of that power until power is back in the neighborhood. That was the concept of the resiliency. So how do you build a flood-proof building? So we started off, we said, well, how about a boat? Boats are flood-proof, right? And they're made of something that's called structural insulated panels. You have two skins of, in this case, fiberglass, and you have insulation. You have foam on the inside. Now, for boats, the foam is for buoyancy, but it's also resists heat flow. So we thought, oh man, we're geniuses. Let's just make a boat as a house. And we went far down this route. Did a lot of, this was a graduate student who had a lot of boat building experience, who was on the team. We partnered with an engineering firm called Gurit that manufactures these materials in addition to doing design. I used to go up to Rhode Island once a week with students, and we met with these people often, and they just thought it was hilarious that we were still using steel and wood. Because their stuff is super light, space shuttle, it's very durable. You can put it outside of the building because it's waterproof. Anyway, they thought we were cute with our little steel and wood concept. So we were far down this route, and then we went for a preliminary meeting with the Solar Decathlon administration. Solar Decathlon is a government. You have a government contract, and you're basically designing a pavilion, a public pavilion for an event. So you have to meet very stringent codes, and they said, well, you can't build this because it doesn't meet code. And we said, well, what do you need? I mean, we've got the best engineers in the world. We can, and we're an engineering school. We can give you whatever you want. And they said, no. We get that. And first of all, we're sure that you can come up with the structural information. But what we need is something that's comparable to housing, and we need it basically for fire. We need proof that this system, the entire system that you're designing, will meet the standards of housing code, and that means you have to have this ICCES evaluation report. It would take a year, cost like $250,000. We didn't have $250,000. We didn't have a year. So the reason I'm saying this in this supposed to be sort of an introductory talk about this kind of thing is because there's a deep message here, is that innovation is great, but it has to be thought of in the context of your situation, and you don't want to reinvent the wheel all the time. So what we did, that's how we came back to this image that I showed you before. We stopped and we said, wait a minute, okay, geez, what are we going to do? How are we going to redesign this thing at this point? And we thought, wait, what are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to make it to where this building does not fill with water. Okay, so why don't we just design a building, go the opposite way. Let's make something that any contractor on the Jersey Shore or Long Island would understand if they were motivated. It's just a few just extra layers, but it's the same materials, and make the floodproofing as simple as we can make it. And so that basically turned the floodproofing into a layer of well-designed plastic that was essentially boat grade boat grade sheathing. We used existing marine detailing, like for caulking and all the hardware that we use, the screws. So it was just basically using existing technologies but recycling them into a house. So the envelope then was just a stick frame reconfigured. The only thing then we needed to, well, another thing we needed to design was then the protection for all of the fenestration, the glass. And so the concept here was to have flood shutters that closed over the glass when the storm was coming. And so we developed these flood shutters that then became a large part of the architectural design because they were thought of from the beginning. And this was something that very early on, in the earliest, if you look at the earliest sketches of this project, we were working on this. The idea then is you can see here the hardware on these panels. These were highly engineered. The top panel is different than the bottom panel because there's different requirements. It's lighter at the top so that it can lift more easily, and then the bottom it's heavier so that it's more structurally sound so that it can take the water loads. And the idea was that when a storm is, well, when in normal use, the shutters are up and they are sun shutters, and they were sized so that we were letting the sun in the winter when we wanted and blocking it in the summer with typical passive solar design. And then if a storm was coming, you would close them down from the outside and leave. We designed a simple 6-to-1 pulley system, mechanical advantage pulley system, so that two people could easily close these and lock them down. It looks like the reason that guy's on the inside over there is because that's actually an outdoor porch. So this could happen in 10 minutes. You're closing these down, locking them up. And then, like I said, when they're open, they're really the most noticeable part of the architectural gesture. So just like the power system, they were integrated from the beginning. And so the power system had to be sized so that it would meet our power goals that were part of our, as part of both the sustainability and the resiliency goals of the project. And so that's where we had to do all the energy modeling from the beginning. Here's the system on the competition site. We were pretty innovative in how we thought of this. The roof-mounted arrays were well, first of all, they were separated into a series of arrays so that if one of them went down, others would work. But the roof-mounted arrays created electricity, and the shutter-mounted flexible arrays produced hot water directly. So, in other words, and hot water is another form of storage, right? So we would have both electricity and hot water available whenever the power was out, if the sun was out. Another thing that was important to us, based on our experience with Superstorm Sandy, was making some power available to the community. So this is a picture from Superstorm Sandy in Hoboken. These little powering stations popped up. So Hoboken is hilly, so there's parts of the city that were not flooded and others that were. And so the places that weren't flooded, people would set up these stations so that neighbors could come and power their electronics and things they needed until they got power back. And so we wanted to emulate this in the SU+RE house. And so what we did was create this little powering station. It's over by, you can see there's the car charger there because we had an electric car. That's also part of the competition requirements. But the idea is that if there is a power outage and there's been a flood, the neighbors can come, this is on the street side, and power their electronics or whatever they need. They can sit on this bench and do it. And they don't even need to ask anybody. They don't need to go inside, knock on the door because it's at the street. Okay, so that really rounds out the concept of how we dealt with sustainability and resilience. But I want to take it further because, okay, we showed that we could do it. We did it. We produced a building. But in a way, that's only half of the thought process. If you got to make it to where it's sustainable and resilient, but if you can't build it at a competitive cost, then it's not going to be built. And if you can't scale it, in other words, do it in the market to where it's graspable by people and desired, then it's not going to have an effect. So let's talk about that level. So first of all, sustainability we know becomes carbon. And the point here is all I'm going to say about these four categories is that we had to quantify them. You can't just say, oh, we're doing that and here's the concept behind it. We had to quantify it. So for our carbon neutrality, the quantities were that we had modeled a very low energy demand. We said less than 90% or about 10% of the comparable house, code designed house, and a modeled energy production of over 3,000 kilowatt hours per year. And in measured at the competition and in Hoboken, we had a surplus as we had thought. So we had quantities and we had measurements. For resilience, our quantities were essentially operational times. Resilience in a way is durability, but it's durability in response to a changing climate. So we wanted to design a building that had a very long lifespan. You do that by thinking about your building envelope in ways that I won't get into. The maintenance cycle for the passive systems was at least 30 years, so it means we're not going to be adding insulation or having to change out the windows in that time period. And the active systems like the mechanical systems, the heat pumps, the photovoltaics, very conservatively, we're saying 15 years. So we had we set quantity goals as part of the design process for resilience. Cost. Our point of view was that it has to be cost neutral too, not just carbon neutral. And this is based on my experience as a builder. No one's going to pay extra to save the world. They talk about it, but you just want to, you don't go to like a brain surgeon and then they say, hey, do you want the really good brain surgery? And I'll charge you more for it. You just they give you the state of the art and you pay what you pay, and it's going to be competitive. So that was important to us, and it's also one of the contests in the competition. So the way it works is that they hire professional cost estimators, and as you're designing, you send them your plans and you send them your spec sheets and how you're actually going to design construct the building, and they look it over and they give you a report, and then you say, we don't think that's right. We want to, we'd like to talk to you about this aspect of what you're saying, and so you have a back and forth. And then you have to give them, actual invoices from things you've bought. It's fairly detailed. And then at the competition, they come around to the actual constructed building and do this again. And so in our case, we came in at about $290,000 for the full thing. Whether or not that's affordable or not depends upon your market, but it is it's a known quantity and it's a buildable. It's something that a professional looking at the project said this is what you could build it for. And the other point to make is that's a speculative cost. That's just the amount of money that it costs for a developer to build it and sell it to you. You have maintenance costs, you have utility costs, and for this project, those are all in terms of the quantities that we built into the design. Those are going to be low, and so you're going to be saving more over time. Okay, so we're saying that we had quantities. We had a specific quantity for how much it would cost to build this thing, and we felt that it was reasonable. But finally, is anybody actually going to do it? Could you do it in the market that we're designing for? And the idea here is that if it's not scalable, if it's just a single cool project, if Brad Pitt designs and has built a really cool eco mansion. Who cares? We all have to do this because it's about climate change. So the way we approach this is that like I said, I was a builder, and we had a long-term architect on the faculty who was very good at pricing projects, and so we looked at comparables in the area that we had. I didn't say this, that there was a Seaside Park, New Jersey, gave us a lot on which we designed the house for, and so using that market, we looked for comps. And the comps, there were a lot of little buildings that were below code, so they would either need to be, if you were going to buy it and move in, you would either need to bring it up to code, and you're probably going to renovate it to other standards. And to do that, we looked at comparables, what it would cost to buy them and maybe do a tear down or to renovate, and we came up with comparable prices. And then we took the cost of lots and put in the construction costs, which we actually hiked up from what the ended up being the price that we got at the competition. We found that we were actually we could make the argument that we were below market rates there, or in the ballpark. Some below, some above others. And so that meant that based on this argument, that you were getting essentially all the sustainability and resiliency features for free: the photovoltaic panels, the flood shutters, the hyper energy efficiency. And our argument that was defensible was that we won the market appeal competition. So a jury of realtors and developers bought our argument and found it feasible. And so again, we're saying that with a building cost of $300,000 or $340,000, I think we were saying, and buying a lot, that we would come in at 90% of market rates. And so you had a zero payback time for the energy system and the renewability features. Okay, so the point here is that we've presented this project in terms of its sustainability, its resilience, its affordability in a market, and its scalability. The idea that you could build it, because the thing I didn't say about scalability too is that the marketing plan was also saying that it was buildable and it was graspable by people who would be building houses in the area. Okay, so that's the project. I think it's probably interesting to talk about the actual build project, because that's a whole other angle on it. Well, anyway, here we go. So as we said, it was built for the 2015 Solar Decathlon. The Solar Decathlon is was a biannual, so it's 2 years long, student competition. So student teams with faculty help and lots of industry money and expertise make a proposal to the DOE, and then they're accepted. About 20 teams come together, and like I said, starting with a blank page, they design a project, and then build it, tear it down, ship it, rebuild it, and run it as a competition. So students designed this and then built it. And I don't want to pretend like it was just students building it. We had a huge amount of professional help. It's incredible teamwork. But here are students starting the project on the site in Hoboken, the temporary foundation, framing. These are students looking at the plans. It had a rain screen system. These crazy heavy windows that we had to all put a lot of effort. We had to build a ramp, or actually a platform, to get them out of the truck. This is a faculty member and a student putting in the air barrier and the intelligent vapor barrier. Fun was had by all. We also had to do lots of diagnostics. So these are students on the left, that's a blower door test. On the right, that's infrared photography, like the picture you saw of the Aqua Tower. You do this as you're building the building so that you can find problems before you close it up. Here's the finished building in Hoboken, looking at Manhattan. Here's students having a dinner in the building before we took it apart and shipped it. It was built in 3 modules, each given a truck, and then all the rest of the stuff like the Grinch Who Stole Christmas in another truck. We did hit a bridge almost instantly within 20 minutes of leaving uh, the Hoboken parking lot. So you have to plan ahead. Luckily, we were experienced and we had done so. We planned 3 days extra, thinking that we would have to slap some paint on something, not have to rebuild a whole parapet. But we got there 3 days early and were able to repair it. Here it is being put together on the building site. The way it works is that they literally shoot a gun off at 7 in the morning one morning. All these trucks are lined up and you've got to drive them into place. And then you have from 7 in the morning till 2 at night every night. You have 9 days to put it together. So it's a huge, crazy, fun effort. So here's the finished project on the competition site. This is the street, what's in the design, the street side. There's our electric car. This is the entrance from the outside with the wraparound porch. That's that door looking, so you're coming into the living room. This is the living room and kitchen. The outdoor patio area on the east and south side. Building again from the south and the east. This is people coming to see it. So the public coming into with student-led tours. We did win the competition, which was a big deal. And I say that it's not only a big deal because it's a great thing to do, but it's also because it vindicates the design approach that we took and showed that. And we run 7 out of 10 contests, so pretty much the thought process that I talked about in this little presentation was vetted by professionals and said to be believable, and we actually built it and showed that it could produce the power it said it would and have the comfort level inside that it said it would. Then instead of going to Seaside Park, once you win something like this, it gets pretty. There was a frantic kind of, I don't know, not just machinations just to decide where it should actually go. And so it ended up at the Liberty Science Center as a permanent exhibit, so you can go see it if you're in Jersey City. We did write a book about it, or actually edited an edition of Architectural Design magazine. And so it's us talking about the project, but also a number of other professionals from around the world talking about the concept of sustainable and resilient design systems. So this book's available if you're interested in learning more. I wrote the introduction for that, and so if you like or are curious about the thought process I'm talking about in this presentation, you could read that to get a more detailed understanding of my point of view on it. You can go to the Solar Decathlon website to look at the plans are available there. The Revit model is available there. Our narratives, documents, and our project specifications, everything's there. That's part of an open source competition. There is a competition website, surehouse.org, and on my own personal website I have more information if you're interested. I am now I'm not at Stevens anymore. I'm at New York Institute of Technology as a associate professor of architecture. My focus has become this is all I think about, this stuff, and my focus has become simulations, building performance simulations, and really two-pronged. One is teaching. I really think, and that's a whole other talk, but that this needs to become that architects need to have building performance simulation as just part of their toolbox, just like sketching. They need to have it because it's a hole in the design process right now. Architects have a lot of control over early design, and if they're not thinking about these levels of performance, it just causes problems down the road. Talk to any engineer to get information. So I run something called the SAMELAB, the Simulated and Measured Environments Lab at NYIT. We have really our main, if you're curious about what we're doing, you can go to our YouTube channel, NYIT SameLab. It's a lot of videos about different simulation workflows, mostly in Climate Studio, which is a simulation platform for rhinoceros. Anyway, that's more professional than I need to get to in this conversation. And this is my information. If you want to contact me, like I said, this is all I think about. Well, that's not true, but professionally, I've been working on this for many years, and I'm always looking for to give to hear what people are doing, to get involved in other projects, and to share my experience.